good news is you can protect yourself and your family from coronavirus or COVID-19. A face mask is one method used to prevent the spread of disease. They do so by reducing the spread of germs. When you cough, sneeze, or talk, you release tiny droplets in the air that may infect others. Please remember, disposable masks must be used once then thrown into a garbage can. To put your mask on, wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water. Check if there are any visible tears or holes on the mask. If there are none, hold the mask by the ear loops. Place a loop around each ear, then pinch or bend the stiff edge to the shape of your nose. Pull the bottom of the mask over your chin. If you have a face mask with a band, hold the mask in your hand by the nosepiece with your fingertips. You will see the headband hanging freely. Bring the mask to your nose level, then pull the top strap over your head. When it is time to remove the face mask, wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. You can also use a hand sanitizer to clean your hands. Whatever you do, make sure you don't touch the front of the mask. Remember, the front of the mask is contaminated. If you have the face mask with a band, lift the band over your head to remove the mask. If you have a face mask with ear loops, only touch the ear loops. Hold both of the ear loops and gently lift and remove the mask from your face. Throw the mask in the garbage, then wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Protect yourself and your family from COVID-19.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our show today. We'll be looking at COVID-19, and it has descended on us in Jamaica and the world in general. And we're going to be looking at some strategies how we can deal with it. And so we want to okay, phone call. Hey, hello, Romain. What's up?
Hi, Uncle, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. What's up?
Somewhat alright. The COVID-19 thing just had me a little bit worried, and
Wow. Can I tell you, I'm on set right now. We're talking about that right now. So please, you have to get to the point quickly. So what's up with COVID-19 and you? What's up?
I mean, I'm not working.
Yeah.
Chantel probably pregnant,
Oh,
expecting,
wow. Yeah.
and her hours cut down to 2 weeks. Bills need to pay, racking up debt.
So how's that making you feel? Stressed and fearful, eh?
Stressed, worried, everything that you can possibly put in the where you can say is like you have no control over anything right now.
Yeah, and that sounds like what a lot of persons are going through right now, Ramin, because a lot of persons are anxious and they're fearful and they're stressed out and they're worried. But, you know, my take on it's nothing new in the sense that anxiety and stress and worry is normal part of life. And I remember, for example, let me give you an example. You remember when you were going to primary school and you owed the vendor money? Yeah, and you were anxious. You didn't want to go to school, and you were stressed out because you didn't know how you were going to pass or navigate your way out of the situation. You remember that?
Yeah, Uncle, but I'm still trying to figure out how that would be the same situation having an expecting wife at home and not able to pay your bills and racking up more debt because you have to be using the credit card and not paying anything on it.
All right, cool, Romain. All right, so tell you what, we'll talk some more. I'll call you later and we can go through. But the emphasis that I wanted to make was that, you know, these things, anxiety, stress, and worrying, they're all caused from fear of the unknown. How are you going to navigate this? So, but we'll talk later, all right?
All right, Uncle.
So, hail up the wifey for me, all right? Cool.
Yeah, later, bye.
All right, bye. Oh, we're still on? Oh, okay, fine. All right, guys, I just want to take the time out to tell you, it's not that I'm trivializing the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic that's upon us, but every single day we have things that makes us anxious, we worry about them, and we're fearful. And that is basically what is happening to us in Jamaica and the rest of the world. we're fearful. This is a new norm. And so we're fearful and we're anxious. And I'm saying to you, and I'm encouraging you guys that don't be overly concerned. Follow the guidelines from the government. Follow the things that they say you should do. Wash your hands, keep social distances, all of that. But I would suggest that you use the time to navigate or think, how am I going to come out of this post COVID-19? Remember, guys, that fear is not real. Now you may ask, why would I say that? So I'm reading this book here, and it says, fear is a realistic possibility or perception of something that may happen. May happen. So you're fearful about something that may never happen. And so, not again trivializing COVID-19, but what we should do is use the time to get together as family in our containment. But what we should do is use the time to get together as family in our containment.
COVID-19 and not know because they have no symptoms. You, on the other hand, could be hospitalized for 2 months or more if you become infected. Is it worth it? Stay socially connected, but keep the physical distance. Stay 6 feet away and avoid a hospital stay. COVID-19 is not over. Protect yourself while protecting others. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The good news is you can protect yourself and your family against the coronavirus called COVID-19. We touch lots of things every day, like doorknobs, phones, keyboards, tables, cupboard drawers, refrigerator doors, and light switches. Don't touch these things unless you absolutely have to. One way to lower the risk of getting the virus is to wipe down everything at the start of the day. Clean frequently touched surfaces and objects at home, like doorknobs, with disinfectant or soap and water. Once done, wash your hands properly. Protect yourself and your parents from the coronavirus or COVID-19.
Hello? 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 Yeah, you. Hold on, and a pandemic winner. You're not wearing a mask, you're not washing your hand, and you're not keep the required 6 feet distancing from other people. And what could I really cause you? You need to stop it. That no mask, no wash, and no distance something there, nah keep. You know what keep? COVID-19. Yeah, it not gone nowhere. COVID-19, they are same way. So here what you are going to do for all of we. Wear your mask, wash or sanitize your hands pan a regular, and yeah, keep your distance, please. And thanks.
My people, my people, my people, many of us feel concerned or overwhelmed by what is happening with the novel coronavirus around the world and here in Jamaica. It is no different for our beautiful children. Parents and caregivers, I beg you to take the time to talk with your children about how they are feeling and how they can protect themselves. Guess what? We have some tips for you. Help your children not to panic. You know, sometimes when children hear the word corona or COVID-19, they panic, they get worried, and that's okay. But it's up to us to help settle their nerves. First thing we need to do is be calm as parents and adults. Stop. Breathe in, breathe out. And now is the time to start the conversation with your children to find out what they've heard or what they know. And then use age-appropriate language that your children will understand so that they can explore their fears and to comfort them. Also remind your children that most people who get COVID-19 do not get very sick and they do recover.
Encourage your children to get the facts. There's a lot of fake news and wrong information out there. So please encourage your children to get the facts. Now, your older children especially who are exposed to social media, they could be exposed to a lot of wrong information. So hear what? If your child asks you a question and you do not know the answer, no is not the time to guess. What you're going to do is you're going to check reliable sources. You're going to check the World Health Organization. You're going to check PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. You're going to check the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And of course, you're going to check UNICEF. They are good sources of information. Check them. You and your child can learn. No, it's not about the doom and gloom alone, you know. I want you to share the good stories too. The stories of triumph, the stories of our health sector workers who are on the front lines ensuring that we bring this pandemic under control. Listen, in every obstacle you have opportunity. This is a good time for some family time getting closer, all right?
Make sure your children know how to protect themselves. So talk to them about 6 simple steps. Number 1, wash their hands. And I don't just mean talk to them, but show them how to do it the right way. They're to wash their hands frequently with soap and water for about 20 seconds. Or if you're like my 8-year-old daughter, she'll tell you the length of time it takes you to sing the ABCs. Whatever you do though, make it fun, especially if you have younger children. Make up a dance, make up a song, just have them washing their hands as much as possible. Number 2, they are to cover those mouths and noses if they're coughing or sneezing. And they should do it with a bent elbow, or as I like to call it, the dab. Or they can go ahead and use a tissue, just that as long as they throw away that tissue in the bin. Remind them they're not to leave it on any surfaces or areas. Number 3, and this is an important one, avoid close contact with persons who might have the cold or flu-like symptoms, but also remind your children not to be unkind to those persons who might be sick. We want to show them love and respect in all of this. Number 4, and I know this is a hard one, but remind your children to avoid touching their face as much as possible. Number 5, use or create new ways of greetings. You heard me. No hugs, no handshakes, no high fives. How about those air hugs, those namastes, the foot knocking, the wagwan? Whatever you do, keep your distance.
acting, and other officials from government. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
Thank you, Naomi. Good afternoon to everyone here at our media center, everyone listening in radio and television land, and of course, everyone joining us via social media. Now, unfortunately, we were not able to show our usual graphs in our last few press conference, and I committed that I would have them restored and displayed in this press conference. So you should by about now be seeing our usual graphs being displayed. You should now also be seeing the solid black line, which shows that we have a cumulative number of cases, 3,183, if that's on the screen now. Unfortunately, we have had 34 deaths as depicted by the red line. And on behalf of my government, I extend sincere condolences to the families and friends of those who have passed on. The green line, which you should now be seeing, that shows that we have had 974 persons who have recovered. And our recovery rate now stands at 30.6%. The final line is the blue line, and that shows that we have 2,096 active cases, and that is the number of persons who still have the virus. As of yesterday, we had 112 persons hospitalized. We also have 17 persons isolated in government facilities, 2,190 isolated at home, and 7 quarantined in a government facility. We also have 26,553 persons quarantined at home. Well, I should be clear with that. They have been issued quarantine orders. I can't say definitively that they are all quarantined at home. As I've indicated, over the past few weeks, we have now moved into a new phase of the pandemic. Following consultations with PAHO and WHO, the Ministry of Health and Wellness last week formally declared that Jamaica is now in the phase of community transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This means that the transmission of the virus can no longer be easily traced from one member of the population to another through a chain of transmission. It also means that the virus is no longer confined to clusters, but is now island-wide. What is of particular concern is the significant rise in the number of deaths. We now have 34 deaths from COVID-19. The number of deaths has doubled over the last 2 weeks. Now, the advent of community transmission has important implications for the management of the pandemic, both for the country as a whole and for you as an individual. Given the rising numbers, we have to tighten some of our measures initially for a 2-week period. The island-wide curfew time will be brought forward from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. starting tomorrow, September 8th, 2020, at 8 p.m., ending the following morning at 5 a.m. each day until 5 a.m. Wednesday, September the 23rd, 2020. The gathering limit is being reduced from 20 persons to 15. Persons in public spaces will not be allowed to gather in groups exceeding 15 persons as of Tuesday, September 8, 2020, ending Tuesday, September the 22nd, 2020. Persons 70 years and older will be required to stay home, but will be allowed to leave home once each day for the necessities of life, which means that they can leave home to go to the closest practicable location for the purposes of obtaining food, medical supplies, conducting financial transactions, overseeing their place of business, attending a place of worship, or physical exercise. What this means now is that we are reducing the age limit from 75 to 70, given the high vulnerability of persons in this age group, particularly for those with comorbidities. Now, most of our deaths are persons in this category, and I'm imploring everyone to be especially careful. Persons 70 years and over need to be particularly extra careful, but also younger persons who may come into contact with our seniors. Of the 34 deaths from COVID-19, 19 were persons 70 years and over. Now, "15 of the deaths were persons below 70, and 15 had comorbidities or other risk factors. This highlights the impact of age and comorbidities on the risk of serious illness and death from COVID-19. As I have repeatedly emphasized, younger persons also need to be sensitive. While you may be asymptomatic, you may inadvertently pass on the virus to your mother, your grandmother, or grandfather, putting their lives at risk. The provision of public transportation by motor car will be limited to one person, less than the maximum number of persons allowed to be carried under the relevant license from September 8, 2020 to September 22nd, 2020. And here I will pause to remind all those taking public transportation to ensure that you wear your mask while in the vehicle and to sanitize your hands immediately after you exit the vehicle. I also remind you to make sure that the protocols are being observed before you enter the vehicle. The prohibition on funerals and parties or such events will continue until September the 22nd, 2020. And just a reminder that burials will be allowed, but with strict observation and enforcement of the 15-person rule, and that the 15 includes no more than 10 mourners, with the additional 5 persons comprising the officiating clergy, funeral officials, and the persons preparing the gravesite. Funeral processions are only allowed to include the hearse, the vehicle taking the officiating clergy, and the mourners. Normal church services operating in compliance with the established protocols may continue. Congregants are reminded that gathering in excess of 15 persons are not allowed outside of the place of worship. When the service ends, please leave the premises without congregating outside the place of worship. We're also encouraging all businesses to facilitate persons to work from home if they are able to do so. These are the national measures. Again, let me emphasize that these measures are being constantly reviewed and may be adjusted as deemed fit. Now, I must send a strong message to all Jamaicans about individual responsibility. Given that we are now in the community transmission phase, in our daily interactions, you have to assume that everyone you come into contact with could be carrying the virus. This means you cannot let your guard down. You have to wear your masks properly, covering the nose and mouth. I've seen where persons are wearing their mask under their chin, on the lobe of one ear, and some not wearing any masks at all. You have to protect yourself by wearing your mask, wearing it properly, and wearing it consistently. You also have to maintain social distance. This is probably the most difficult of the protocols to maintain, but persons have to develop a sense of their spatial awareness. 6 feet apart, that's what is recommended. And so usually an outstretched arm and the other person who is close to you, their outstretched arm would give you that 6 feet distance. We recommend strongly that you purchase and take with you hand sanitizers to sanitize your hands regularly, particularly if you are going to be touching surfaces of which you are uncertain. The recent surge in our numbers should have made it clear to everyone that there is no room for complacency. The health authorities have advised that our surge in cases can be linked to a number of activities, conventions, funerals, parties. No doubt there will be some effect from nomination day. But we continue to have control and regulations on those activities. Another causative factor is the number of persons who are arriving from overseas and not adhering to their quarantine orders. While we have the ability to geofence persons through the Jam COVID app, we have generally been relying on moral suasion to encourage persons to be responsible. We have, however, started a stronger enforcement drive, and this will continue. And you are seeing in the press reports of the police acting, and persons are being interdicted and prosecuted. Now, I know there have been a lot of discussions and rumors about a lockdown. The government's position on this has been very clear. We want to protect lives and livelihoods. Lockdowns have a devastating impact on the economy. In fact, all the measures that restrict movement, including curfews, have the effect of slowing down economic activity. In keeping with our evidence-based, measured, and proportionate risk management approach, we are tightening up some of the measures, as I have announced, for 2 weeks, and then we will reassess. You have heard me say many times that we need to learn to live with the virus. The only sustainable way for us as a country to protect both our lives and livelihoods is to learn to go about our normal everyday activities with restricting movement to absolutely what is necessary and being responsible in how we conduct our business. Until we get a viable vaccine, which is at least 1.5 years away, this outbreak has to be managed by the collective will of the people through the responsible exercise of our individual choice and by these actions that the government will take in restricting unnecessary movement. I urge all Jamaicans to unite, for each Jamaican to commit to doing his or her part in overcoming this spike in the pandemic. I am confident that together we will flatten the curve once more. Thank you. I'll ask Minister Tufton to give more details on the current spike.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So just to add some additional and more current information on the latest 24 hours. So we've seen, unfortunately, Prime Minister, one additional death related to COVID-19, and we regret that death, of course, and we express our condolences to family members. The deceased is an 83-year-old female who had comorbid conditions, hypertension and diabetes, and she hails from Manchester. And just to reinforce the point that the Prime Minister made earlier, this age cohort and the fact that there are underlying conditions represents the most vulnerable groups. And it is so important that we observe the protocols to avoid the infection. The total number of deaths, as the Prime Minister said, represents 34, which is 1.1% of the overall number of affected persons. 3 additional cases were coincidental death, of COVID-19 positive individuals, and 5 more deaths of COVID-19 positive individuals are under investigation. In terms of the current numbers, Jamaica confirmed in the last, overall 3,183, with an additional 80 new cases in the past 24 hours. So that's 80 cases and one death. Recoveries have increased by 16, bringing the total number of persons who have recovered and have been released from care to 974, that is 30.6%. Of the 80 confirmed cases, there are 47 females, 32 males, with one sex classification currently being investigated. I suspect the report did not come in time to determine male, female. We'll get that from the hospital and add that to the categorization relevant. And their ages range from 6 months to 87 years. The cases were recorded in Kingston and St. Andrew, which continues to lead the positive cases, 32, St. Catherine, 25, St. Thomas, 11, Portland, 6, St. Mary, 3, Manchester, 2, and Westmoreland, 1. All 80 cases are under investigation, and really what that means is that having discovered the cases, just received the results in the last 24 hours, the team would have now across the country gone out to do their contact tracing, their interrogation, and would follow up to get more details as to the origin. But the concept of community transmission suggests that we're going to have more of these cases under investigation, because that's really where it starts, and there is no link that is readily established to a positive case, which makes it more difficult to track and to engage in preventive measures. In terms of active cases, 65.8% are active cases, 2,096. 71 or 4.4% have returned to their countries of origin. 34, as I said earlier, have died. That's 1.1%. Prime Minister, if you'd allow me, I'd like to just say something to the country as it relates to active cases. Now, this phase that we're in for community transmission will see active cases being grouped based on the needs of those individuals for care. And increasingly, the more positive cases you have, is the more persons will have to get well at home once they are asymptomatic. And if you place your minds back to the original modeling that Dr. Webster Carr, who is here, our lead epidemiologist, had presented to the country, where up to 1.5 million of our population may contract COVID. The fact is the overwhelming majority will have no need to be placed in a hospital setting. They can stay at home. Once they have somewhere they can isolate, a room with a bathroom, under certain protocols where they don't come in contact with others, and they will get well over time, whether 2 weeks or so, with the monitoring, of course, of the public health team, whether from their health center or from the hospital. There's another category that we will have to place in a setting that is organized and that is managed by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, by the government. And we have rented or leased a number of those facilities across the country. And that would have health personnel manning those facilities, providing care, but they would not be hospitals. And then there's a third category, which would be persons placed in a hospital bed, a hospital setting. Though that category is reserved for persons who are of a particular age, have comorbidities, are displaying symptoms, a combination or all of the above. But those persons would definitely need to be in that setting. The truth is that a minority, or we certainly hope that this continues, that a minority of the positive cases will need that type of intensive care. And it gets less as you get more intense, to the point of requiring a ventilator, where the modeling shows a small fraction of the overall numbers. I raise the point to say the more positives we get is the more persons are going to have to be directed by the medical team based on initial assessment that, listen, you're going to have to get well at home. But these are the conditions that you have to follow. And I think it's important so persons appreciate the approach. In terms of classification, 459 imported cases, 675 cases are contacts of confirmed cases, 336 cases are related to the workplace cluster in St. Catherine, 243 are local transmission, not epidemiologically linked, and 1,570 cases are under investigation. Again, significant number under investigation in keeping with the community transmission phase. The gender breakdown, 55% are females, that's 1,746, and 1,433 or 45% are males. And this home quarantining, 7 persons are currently in facility quarantine, which would be the lease space that the ministry would manage and the government would pay for. And there are 26,533 in home quarantine. I want to pause again and divert a bit from the narrative to say that a big part of the challenge that we face as a country and from public health's perspective are persons not observing the protocols around home quarantining. And again, there is no option to home quarantining in the context of removal of restrictions where more persons are coming in. There's no government, no country that will have enough hotel rooms or rooms of other kind to house 26, 27, 28, 30,000 people. It's just not practical. It's not possible. It just doesn't exist. When we had the opportunity, we would lease hotels and government would pay for those hotels. Today, the hotel industry has started up. So home quarantining, frankly speaking, separate and apart from literally shutting people out, which is not an option that the government is exercising because we have to live with COVID, is an absolute necessity for all the practical purposes that I have explained. But what is so important with home quarantining is that persons follow the protocol. And we're not getting enough of that. It only takes one person not following that protocol to spread the virus, to create a community lockdown. And we have seen cases like that. So it's very difficult, but we certainly encourage persons to comply. In terms of testing, we have done 63,890 tests, 638 new samples tested in the last 24 hours, and I've given the numbers as it relates to the number of positives. I close my section by just outlining that in keeping with what the ministry and the Honorable Prime Minister has said about this new phase, over the next week or so, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, working with its partners within the private sector, the Cabinet, the Prime Minister, will be unveiling a series of new protocols that will govern the community transmission phase. This phase comes with it in terms of best practices, and this is guided by WHO, PAHO, and our own unique circumstances as a country. A slight adjustment or an adjustment in the approach towards testing, adjustment to the approach towards workplace and the protocols around workplace. And what we're doing now, we're actively engaged in assessing and laying that out, and we'll make that public to the country. In addition to that, of course, there has to be a communications program that helps the country, all of us, to appreciate what community transmission means, what all our respective role would represent, and hopefully we'll get the buy-in of all stakeholders, the private sector, the communities, individuals, and so on. The concept, as defined by the epidemiologists, of community transmission is that it's an indication of a surge. And that surge, based on best practices and based on whether we follow the procedures or not, would take about 2 to 3 months, or could theoretically take about 2 to 3 months, where you see constant numbers or even increasing numbers before it peaks, and then you see a decline. But a lot of that is subjected to how much we comply as a country. And the government will have to use the levers of policy to try and guide that process to the extent that persons are not complying. So I really want to just say again, it really is up to us, and we will speak more to that from public health perspective as the days go by. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister. If there are questions.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. I've been asked to convey from persons on social media their congratulations to you. Unfortunately, we do not have the interactive Zoom feed this evening. I'll be taking questions from members of the media who are online and WhatsApp. First question is from Ms. Althea Saunders from the Jamaica Observer. She wants to know if the University Hospital of the West Indies is out of ventilators, and what is the status of ventilators across the public health system? How many do we have, and how many are needed? The Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Tufton, will respond to those questions, Althea.
Right. So the University Hospital of the West Indies is not out of ventilators. What we had a few days ago was a situation where they had issues with beds. And that's because the 17 beds that are reserved for COVID patients were full, were occupied, and we had to recalibrate and shift around some of the beds available for other purposes in order to expand and accommodate more persons. Since that discussion, we have had an additional 24 beds, I'm told, added to the capacity at UWI, and a fairly large portion of that would be for COVID patients. We have also 16 beds, I'm told, for suspected COVID, 17 for COVID, and those were fully occupied. We have since established an area, or a new ward, if you will, a COVID ward, with an additional 24. So UE is not currently full, but a few days ago, they did have some logistics issues around beds. As it relates to ventilators, we are now at 118 ventilators. Now, again, I say, when we started on this in preparation for what is now community transmission, the public health system had 25 ventilators. So commendations are in order to the public health team, to the government, to the Prime Minister, to the Ministry of Finance, that has made the resources available. We have coordinated procurement with our partners, overseas partners, bilateral partners in some instances, and we now have a fairly good batch of ventilators, very high-tech, brand new, and right now we're not using, I don't think we're using 10% of them. So we have significant capacity as it relates to ventilators. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We have two questions with many parts from Mr. Damian Mitchell of the Jamaica Gleaner. The first question, based on the rate of spread, at what point will the government halt testing?
Right, so the protocol that I spoke to earlier around testing will give better particulars on the approach to testing, but I don't foresee us halting testing. What I think will happen is that there'll be a more strategic application of who gets tested and who does not get tested. And the technical explanation of that I will leave to the clinicians, but I've been told that the general approach will be to be more strategic. But again, give us a few days and we'll give better particulars.
Dr. Tufton, if you could remain. The second question then is, can the government reveal the assessment of the prison system in respect of what's being implemented with the COVID protocol, and how the government is seeking to fix the issue, particularly at the South Camp Adult Correctional Center?
Right. So I'll give the clinical response, and if Minister Minister Chang is here, we did identify a few cases, positive cases at that facility. Those persons were isolated. A number of tests were administered based on the contact tracing within the facility. We have not found any additional cases. The fact is that the prison system, as part of the institutional vulnerabilities that we have identified, prisons, infirmaries, and so on, have a protocol that was established early, and that protocol is implemented, is enforced in collaboration with health and the authorities that manage the prison system. They have been, how many? I'm told there are some investigations that are continuing. I had heard that there were up to 5 cases, and there are additional investigations. But the fact is the matter is being dealt with, and there is a protocol that is used to deal with those circumstances.
Thank you, Dr. Tufton. Prime Minister, question for you. Clearly, yours truly is being pressured this evening with all these questions, but I will do my best to go through all of them. The question is, the work from home announcement, is it an order or a recommendation? It's not quite clear.
No, it's not. We've not made it. And well, there is an order in place already, which says that if you can work from home, you should. And we encourage employers to facilitate this. I'm merely repeating that position and asking employers to, if they can, make that a priority. As we review, we may go back to a position where we probably could say that government agencies would be required to put in place a stricter work from home, but we're not at that point as yet. So it is a recommendation to employers.
All right, thank you, sir. Our Zoom feed is up. Let's see if we can hear from Miss Brittany Clark from Nationwide News Network. Brittany? Brittany, could you unmute your mic for us? And go ahead with your question. All right, we're not hearing Brittany, gentlemen. All right, Brittany?
Yeah, that's why we're going to build this super backbone, broadband backbone, so that everything can be seamless virtually. So we can hear Brittany at one click.
All right, Brittany, are you able to speak now? Let's see if
Are you hearing me right now?
Yes, we're hearing you perfectly well. Thank you, and thank you for your patience.
Okay, great. All right, so my first question is, can the Minister of Health confirm whether or not a member of the Ministry of Finance has tested positive for COVID-19 and what control measures are in place? Secondly, we have noticed a reduction in the number of persons being tested for COVID-19. Is this as a result of a difficulty to contact trace? If not, could we have an explanation? And the third question, given that the healthcare system is currently overwhelmed, is the ministry making considerations to take back doctors who were laid off earlier this year? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. The first question, whether or not there's a positive case at the Ministry of Finance, I have no such information, but I want to just expand a little on that, and I don't want to create any fear, but there are going to be many positive cases in this phase across the country. And I'm saying it, and I'm saying it boldly and confidently, because that is what, which is what community transmission is about. And that is why the Prime Minister, myself, and others have said, assume that everyone you come in contact with is potentially a COVID positive case. Wear your mask, practice the 6 feet distancing, sanitize, everyone, whether it's a relative, a partner, a church brother, the pastor, whomever it is, because the concept of community transmission, not defined by us, defined by WHO, by PAHO, in collaboration with all the countries of the world, means that cases are going to pop up every and anywhere at any point in time. And it's a phase that we have to go through. We anticipated it, we had predicted it, we're there now. We did well to delay it, to prepare, to buy the ventilators and the beds and so on, but it's here now, and the country has to come to terms with dealing with that. So, you know, it really is going to become redundant, frankly speaking, to ask if there's a case at, you know, the JPS or the Ministry of X or the OPM, maybe. Let's hope not. I'm knocking board.
There might be cases anywhere.
It could be anywhere. That's the point.
And we don't know.
And we don't know. So that's the first question. The second one, about what was the second question again? The ministry being overwhelmed? Huh? Oh, the testing. As I had said earlier, no, it's not a change in the existing protocol. But there is going to be an outlined approach that will vary somewhat from what is the case. Right now, what we're finding is that everyone with a sniffle and with they heard that they had a passing acquaintance with someone is positive. And I say passing, meaning that they were in the same building, not in the same room. They want a COVID test. And frankly speaking, we're going to have to be more calculated and more deliberate and strategic in the approach. But right now, we are developing that and we'll make that public. But there's no cutting back at this point in time. And the third, about doctors being laid off, I don't have that information. In fact, last week we indicated that effective the 1st of September, we brought on board 121 new medical officers who recently graduated, who had no established posts, but in keeping with the need to strengthen the medical personnel, the government, through the Ministry of Finance, approved the position, and they have been deployed across the country. So we have actually increased the cadre, not reduced them.
Thank you, Minister. Let's go over to Dion Jackson Miller of Radio Jamaica. Dion.
Thank you so much, Naomi. In moving from the feed to Zoom, I lost a bit, so please forgive me if this question was asked already. In relation to the testing, in relation to the significant reduction in the number of testing from, for instance, 1205 on August 30 to 638, we're hearing now. That would be my first question, the reason for that. And my second question would be the change in the curfew time. I hear the Prime Minister who has said repeatedly that we have to live with it and we have to balance livelihoods and restrictions, but what kind of difference does the government think will be made by the shift from 9 p.m. to 8?
Yeah, good question, Dion. The consideration for 8 p.m. was to allow for persons time to travel home and time to do last-minute shopping and to do any other thing that we could consider to be necessary. So it would, in my opinion, eliminate any unnecessary activity. It's hard to quantify what the benefit would be for that elimination of unnecessary activity. But certainly, it would contribute to a reduction in spread. Certainly, it would limit, for example, if someone wanted to keep an event, a party or something, which would be illegal, but they would try to do it nonetheless. So having the two measures, being the curfew and the restriction on those events, would help to ensure that there are no unnecessary activities that could contribute to spread. So it's hard to quantify, but when you put all the measures together, it does have the desired effect. Minister Tufton.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. So the issue of testing, again, I'll repeat for your benefit that there's no change in approach to testing. We test using the equipment and the reagents, and two different technologies, one more efficient, more modern than the other. And from time to time, for whatever reason, whether it is a servicing issue related to the equipment, ordering and getting reagents on time, as we had said in the past, we did have an issue with sourcing reagents for one of the machines because of the global shortage. You do find a dip in the numbers, but just for a while. And so I'm being told by the team that we may have had one or two glitches while the numbers went from 1,000 to 500 or 600. But you'll see it back up to those numbers in short order. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Let's go over to Vanessa Silvera from Jamaica Information Service.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Doctors are reporting that there are persons who are still coming to their offices, turning up with symptoms of COVID-19, wondering if they have it. They're asking the health minister to repeat the protocols if persons suspect that they have COVID-19. And two, is there any update on the way forward for students, given that the new school year is set to get underway shortly?
Right. So the approach to the protocols for how a potential or suspected COVID case is treated is not just distributed through the public system, it's also made available through the private system. And it is a conversation that is continuous to the extent that the private practitioners are uncertain. The public system does have a method that engages them and engages them periodically. So I will mention your concern to the team. They're here in the room. And if there is now a need for another consultation, there certainly will be a protocol and a new protocol in short order that we put out and will be circulated to them. Then they'll do the follow-up as it relates to that. As it relates to school, obviously the back-to-school dates are decided on by the cabinet, the Minister of Education, the Prime Minister, and the team, based on consultations and advice from public health. The Minister of Education did announce October 1st back-to-school period, October 5th, sorry. And in preparation for that, I think he was very clear that he works very closely with public health to ensure that the protocols are placed in the schools. And I know a lot of work has been taking place because I had the opportunity to visit a few schools on September 3rd in my constituency. And I saw quite a number of markers as it relates to where to stand and sanitization stations. So I know a lot of that is taking place, and I'm sure that will continue. As to whether October 5th is the date or not, or there's a review, that's a fluid situation that clearly the cabinet will determine on based on what is happening closer to that time.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question from Ms. Althea Saunders of The Observer. Althea?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure.
we can.
All right. At the rapid testing, given that the numbers are now rising, is there any move now to move towards rapid testing? And if yes, what's the timeline for this?
Okay, so there are two types of tests, and persons tend to confuse the rapid test, which is an antibody test, with the PCR test, which is a test that we do to confirm whether or not someone has the virus, as opposed to an antibody test that determines whether or not persons have antibodies of the virus in them, which means that they have gone through the virus phase. In Jamaica, public health has used, and rightly so, the PCR test to determine the extent to which someone is active with the virus, and then use that to determine a protocol to how to treat with that situation. The most recent and modern machine we have is actually a rapid PCR testing, which takes, if all other things being equal, I'm told could take between up to 5 hours or somewhere in that region. But I think it has to be explained, because when we say to persons it will take 3 days or more, there are other factors that go into the testing of samples. For example, you group samples, so you don't just run one particular sample to get the maximum efficiency. So you have to have the numbers in order to run. And there are other things that goes into the consideration. But that is, in fact, the most efficient PCR rapid test. The other test that persons speak about, which is a 15-minute test or a half-an-hour test, is an antibody test. And that does not give the same information that we want to get as it relates to who actually has the virus active in them. And persons tend to confuse the two. Now, there is a role for antibody testing, and it is something that we think we need to now get a conversation internally going on, because you now have community transmission, and that may require you to test to see to what extent the population is experiencing the virus, the pass-through, if you will. And that we will comment on in due course. The other point I'd make is that there are many discoveries. Modern science is trying hard to play catch-up with COVID-19. And every week, we get correspondence from persons or entities across the world, from different countries, that they have this new breaking technology that is a 10-minute test, a 5-minute test, a 1-hour test. You know, some of this kind of discovery, as is the case with the vaccine, is encouraging, but modern medicine tends to be very conservative to the extent that they embrace a technology that is going to determine on the human anatomy, for fear that if they make errors, it could have consequences. There is an ethics committee, for example, in the Ministry of Health and Wellness that has to approve a number of these most latest approaches. And that ethics committee comprises of technical experts who will take a new discovery, assess it, look at the approvals that have been had, whether in the country of origin, in the US, the federal, FDA, CDC, or in Europe. They don't just accept everything that is presented and then impose it on the population, because that would be, frankly speaking, dangerous. And so there are new inventions out there which we are looking at, but it's difficult to just impose them until you have sufficient approvals based on sufficient trials and so on. And that's an ongoing process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tufton. Sir, there are no further questions, Prime Minister. And so if you could just recap those main points, and then we can say good evening to everyone.
Thank you for that, Naomi. The main points are the government is revising the curfew hours, which will start tomorrow, 8th of September, at 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. The 5 a.m. 5 a.m. the following day until the 23rd of September 2020. Gathering limits are reduced from 20 persons to 15 persons, and that takes effect tomorrow as well, to the 22nd of September. The stay-at-home orders for persons 75 years and older, that has been revised to 70 years. The age has been brought down. And here I must emphasize that this age group, just by virtue of the statistic, seem to be the most vulnerable, particularly if they have comorbidities, and we would advise them to exercise great caution. We exercise our young people as well to be sensitive that even though many of them may be asymptomatic, some of them show absolutely no signs that they have the virus. They should be very careful how they interact with our elders. We are encouraging work from home. We're asking businesses to make that a priority. The number of persons traveling in public transportation should be one, and that is for a taxi, should be one less than the licensed amount. And of course, if you are in public transportation, wear your mask, wind down your windows, sanitize your hands regularly. Funerals are still allowed, obviously. Not funerals, rather, but burials are still allowed. Funerals continue to be prohibited, and parties and the like, those are prohibited until the 22nd of September, when we will make new announcements regarding that. Funerals, as I said, those are prohibited, but burials continue at 15 persons, 10 of whom are mourners, 5 are the officiating clergy and the attendants at the graveside. Normal church services are allowed to continue, providing, of course, they follow the protocols, but we are re-emphasizing that there should be no more than 15 persons gathered in the churchyard. And in fact, we are encouraging people that as the service is over, they should make their way home. The main point of this press conference is that, yes, we now have community transmission. And what that means is that it's difficult to trace the cause of the source of the infection to any particular person. And therefore, you should consider that the virus is generally in the environment. And if you interact with persons, the safest approach is to assume that everyone has the virus, and therefore you should take the necessary precautions, wearing your mask, hand sanitizing, maintaining your social distance. If you're ill, stay home, and all the other measures that have been put in place. We urge persons to observe the quarantine orders. Those who are coming into the island from overseas, if you have been served with a quarantine order, please respect that order and stay home for the 14 days. There are great fears that the country is going to go into a lockdown. A lockdown is not off the books, obviously, if there is a case where we consider it necessary, if there was a rise well outside of what we had anticipated, then that might very well be the case. But we are operating in a situation where, based upon our original projections, these are things that we expect that would happen. And therefore, the appropriate response would not be a lockdown, certainly not at this time. Nevertheless, we have implemented tighter measures, and these tighter measures are designed to slow the spread, to bring it back under control, effectively flatten the curve. It will take some time to have that done, but it will work, and it will work even faster if every single Jamaican practices the protocols that we have put in place, and every single Jamaican takes personal responsibility for their safety. It is a trade-off. If people don't take personal responsibility, then the government has to implement measures. These measures have the effect of controlling movement, and the control of movement has a devastating impact on the economy. And that devastating impact on the economy really could make it even more difficult for you to be personally responsible. So that is the connection. So it starts with the citizen, the individual, being personally responsible, and the government being measured, so that we can protect your life, ensure your safety, and at the same time preserve your livelihoods. We all have to learn to live with the COVID-19 pandemic until there is a vaccine, which could be 1.5 to 2 years. So I guess at the end of this press conference, what you should take away is the need for your personal responsibility. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. May I join with the rest of Jamaica in congratulating you and the ministers who were sworn in today. The Deputy Prime Minister, newly sworn in, the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang has also been here. Of course, the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton. Thank you all for joining us today. We will see you again at another point when we have another briefing. Good night.
What can a little germs do?
Pink eye, running belly, even flu. Germs can make them happen to you.
Put germs on a manners with these. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Always wash your